Mr. Mayor, there are actually no more questions, I don't think. But I want to make a statement, which partly arises from this hearing, which I have been living with as somebody who represents West Virginia, where there are needs, human and physical, of vast proportions, and it's a very small state. And that is in a sense, really the hypocrisy that we put you through a nomination hearing and everybody asks for infrastructure is the lifeblood of the country and next gen is so important but we hate rules and regulations and there are 13,000 or whatever it is. And then people talk about minimizing pain as opposed to not maximizing pain, as if that's a brighter light. What is needed in this country for you to be a successful Secretary of Transportation and for us to be a successful country is a willingness to bite a bullet, which some in this Congress, in both houses, refuse to bend to, thus causing others who would bend to it not to bend to it because of the fear of what would happen in the next primary. And it's developed into a fairly fine art. And it is the fastest way to destroy the future of our country that I can possibly think of. Because the prospect is based upon the fact that if you simply eliminate all rules and regulations and certainly don't do any tolls and raise no revenues, that by simply avoiding waste, fraud, and abuse, which I've been hearing for 50 years in government, and which is certainly pertinent and will be done, you know, in Medicaid and Medicare, it's pretty hard to find that stuff. Medicaid and Medicare is so much more efficient than the private healthcare system. It's not even close. They're about 2 or 3% administrative costs. But no, that's you don't want to do that because if you expand Medicaid, the senator's state has rejected that, and has an enormous number of uninsured citizens, but that seems to be okay. We cannot function as a country, and we can certainly not achieve greatness again as a country without having research, without having infrastructure, without having trained people, without having business having confidence in our future and thus deciding to invest in our future because they see that we in the government are willing to invest in our future, and they know it as well as we do. They don't want their taxes to skyrocket, but they know, as do a lot of people with a lot of money, that you can't wish for something or you can't minimize yourself into greatness. You can minimize yourself into just a minimal thing. And you can feel good all along and win election after election, but you're doing the country no favors. So when you talk, and I don't want you to say one word in response to this. When you talk about, you know, doing all the things that you have been asked to do, they're going to cost money. And you can get all the squeezing and tightening. I just can't wait for you to take a look at the FAA and find all the money just sitting there waiting for you to squeeze a couple $1 billion out. It isn't there. The size of the U.S. government in number of people is smaller than any time since Dwight Eisenhower. Now, I don't think there's any American that knows that, and the press certainly doesn't talk about that. It used to be that we were constantly besieged with talks, with sermons on our deficit problems and how that was a symbol of how America was wasting, you know, just wasting. And of course, now the deficit is beginning to disappear, so everything has changed to the debt. None of that's actually what I want to say to you. What I want to say to you is I want you to be a good Secretary of Transportation. And you cannot do that without new revenue. And you cannot do that without goading us in the Congress, which will be hard. You've got to get OMB to agree to it. But sometimes, you know, your predecessor was pretty good at just going around saying what he wanted and getting away with it. You can't do that without revenue. You can't pretend that everything stands still for the last 10 years and you have no more money to do it, and expect to have it. You won't have greatness, you won't have resources, you won't have infrastructure. It's great to talk an infrastructure bank. It's great to talk about the $3 trillion sitting in the coffers of the American enterprise system, but that $3 trillion would come out if they felt that they weren't going to have to do the whole thing all by themselves. People need to pay on a fair basis personal taxes. We need to raise in this country, if we're going to cure cancer, diabetes, or all the other things that plague us, as well as get rid of MRSA, which is one of the great killers in our society. It's come basically out of hospitals, hospital bathrooms that aren't clean, and it's the work on that's being done in the International Space Station to try and get the cure for MRSA, which is something most people don't know about, but it's a terrible killer in this country, and there's no cure for it. So I want to register a strong counter voice about, I totally believe in America's future, but we're not going to get there if all of our demands of you and our aspirations for you are that you cut out more people. You'll do that necessarily as a manager, because managers know how to do that, as governors do. I had to do that. I'd lay off 10,000 people once when I was governor. And that's no fun, but you do what you got to do. But to simply accept the premise, I mean, being a mayor, frankly, is not the same thing as being a president or as a congressperson. We have national responsibilities. If you're going to build a fast freight system or a fast rail system, you don't do it intrastate or intrastate, you do it interstate, and it's a larger function. If you're going to take the CDC seriously, or take the NIH seriously, or the National Science Foundation seriously, or the National Institute of Science and Technology seriously, if you're going to take cybersecurity seriously, if you're going to take any of these things seriously, take our economy seriously, we're going to have to spend money. And the great game around here is you just don't talk about it. You just don't talk about it, because there are some that can't wait for you to do it so that they can get somebody to run against you in the next primary. The beauty of politics is when politics overcomes that kind of smallness. The unbeauty of politics is when that's not possible, when people are driven into submission about honest answers for the future of our country. So I will simply conclude by saying that I hope that you will push us. And the director of OMB is a West Virginian, so by definition, I mean, next to South Dakota, that's about as good as you can get. And she's a West Virginian, and she understands the problems of small rural states and the whole country, which she's worked in. But goad us. If you can't do something because you don't have the money to do it, let us have it. Express your frustrations. Say, I've squeezed this, I've squeezed that, I've squeezed that, I've squeezed. Next gen, I can't do. Don't have the money for it. Or, you know, safety inspections of airlines, or safety inspections of parts of new planes, each one of which is, and I've seen this, because we tried to develop a jet in West Virginia, And there were 13,000 parts of that jet which were individually inspected by inspectors from, I guess, the FAA. Individually inspected. You cut the FAA way back, those people disappear, innovation, entrepreneurship disappears. You don't necessarily create an entrepreneurial society by starving it. You don't do it by bearing it in taxes. You do it by something that is responsible. And responsible means that you have revenues, and you have discipline, you have focus, you have leadership, but you have the money to do what you've got to do, whether it's the military or whether it's the rest of the country. So I would ask that you would keep that in mind.